Hey YouTube, Backpack Hack here coming at you with another trail tip. In another video I did just recently, I showed a lot of different ways that you can use these 35mm film canisters. And one of them was for a sewing kit that I put together. And I make several of these. I have one in my camping gear, one in my backpack gear, I have one in each vehicle, one in my bug out bag, one in each get home bag. And each one has these little teeny spools of different color threads in them. So I can have a variety of colors to choose from, and somebody asked me where I got these little teeny spools from. And so I thought I'd do a video on how I make these. You don't buy them, you make them. And you can go out and buy a bobbin like this. This is a bobbin for standard Singer sewing machine. It's loaded up with this color thread. If you only want to carry one color thread, you could substitute all these with one color, but I prefer to have a variety of colors just so I can make a more permanent repair when I'm out in the field if I have the time. And so I'm going to show you how I make these tiny little spools. I call them backpacker bobbins, and they're very, very simple to make and very, very inexpensive. So I'm going to get this out of the way. Obviously you'll need some thread. A pair of needle nose pliers helps. A sharp blade. I'm going to use my pocket knife, but you can use a hobby knife or even a single-edged razor blade if you wanted to. Pair of scissors. A source of flame. I'm going to use a tea candle, but you can use a regular candle or a lighter or something like that. And some vinyl tubing. This is 1/4 inch outside or 1/4 inch OD vinyl tubing. Now this is the kind of the milky color. It's not the clear stuff. You want to get the milky color. It's a little bit more rigid, not as pliable. I mean, you can't crush this like you can the vinyl tubing because this is made for pressure, I think. I'm not a plumber, but I think this is designed for pressure. You'll see a lot of this this stuff used to supply water to the ice maker and refrigerators. This is where you see a lot of that stuff. And you don't want to get the clear stuff because it's too mushy. You can squeeze it and squish it and it doesn't work. But this is all you really need to make these little backpacking bobbins. So let's get started with the tools I've got here. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning of this video is a pencil, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But in order to make one of these, they are about a 1/2 inch long. Now, I find that a 1/2 inch little bobbin like this can hold 6 to 8 feet of thread very easily. If you want to make them 1 inch long, you could probably get 10 or 12 or 15 feet onto one of those. But I figure 6 or 8 feet of thread is more than enough to take care of a simple repair on some gear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure off about a 1/2 inch of this tubing and cut it off. And I'm going to light my candle here. And I'm going to make the rolled ends on these. And all you really need to do is put this up near the flame. You don't want to stick it into the flame. You want it right in here. You just want to get the heat. You don't want the flame itself. And I wet my finger with spit to make this work a little bit better, but I simply slowly move it up and rotate it, and the heat of the flame is going to melt the plastic or the PVC, and then I'm going to use my finger, and it's a little warm, to cool it off and help dress it out and make it nice and smooth. Now you can see, or hopefully you can see, that there is a edge to that, just like a bobbin. Not a very thick one, but we don't need it very thick because we're not putting a whole lot of thread on this. And do it on both ends. And just use my wet finger. If you want to use tap water, you can, but I just lick my finger and use spit. And we're done with that. Now, what I'm going to do is use my knife to put a couple slits in this. And I'm going to use this 35mm can to make it a little bit easier to understand what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a small slit on this side, and then without rotating it this way, so I've got my slit right here, I'm just going to invert it 180 degrees and make a slit here. The reason for that is that gives me something to put the thread in so it doesn't unravel. One slit is so I can make it easy to thread or run the thread onto it to spool it up, and the other is to tie it off to keep it from unraveling. And this is what the needle nose are for, is to make it a little bit safer to do because you're putting a little bit of force on this and you don't want your finger sitting right up here. So I'm going to take my knife, and like I say, you can use a utility knife or hobby knife or even a single-edged razor, and I'm going to put a small slit here, just like that. And now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to put one on the opposite end, on the opposite side. This is going to help keep it from splitting when it gets exposed to hot or cold weather. Hopefully having them on opposite sides will help keep them from splitting. And let's do orange for this one. I don't have one with orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first off take my thread, and I'm simply going to pull it down into one of those slits, and take my pencil and push up into there to where it sits or holds, and then I can sit here and just merrily thread on or spool on just as much thread as I want on this spool, or my bobbin as I call them. Like I say, a little 1/2 inch spool or 1/2 inch bobbin can easily hold, I found, 6 to 8 feet of thread. That's more than enough to take care of most little emergencies out there in the field. If you want to make them longer, you can. Like I said, make them as long as you want, but at a certain point, you just as well buy a regular bobbin you use for a sewing machine. Now, you'll notice I'm keeping it towards one side, and I'm doing that intentionally to make it easier to find that slit for when I get this loaded up with the thread, as much thread as I want. That's coming off of there. Push it back onto there. It's got enough give that, come on. But once we have enough of the thread that we want on there, and that's probably good enough, I'm going to find that other slit on the opposite end that I started with. And at my age, it's hard to see these things and hard to do this fine stuff, but I'm going to just pull that tight once it gets into that slit. And now it's on there. I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off. I'm going to leave a little bit sticking out like that, but where I started, I'm going to cut that off flush so I don't accidentally try to start with that piece if I ever need to take that off. This way I can just undo this and just pull it out and just thread that into a needle, and I'm ready to start sewing. So that's how you make those. And there you have it. That's how you make what I call my backpacking bobbins. Make as many as you want. If you want to make them a little bit longer, you can. Little ones like what I just showed you will generally hold about 6 or 8 feet of thread fairly easy. 6 or 8 feet will more than take care of a small rip or something like that in a piece of gear. So this is Backpack Hat coming at you with this trail tip. Be safe out there, and I'll see you out on the trail.